The original Sig Sauer P225 was actually known as the P6 in Europe, where it was a duty pistol, primarily in West Germany and some other places. And he replaced the service revolver in a lot of people's holsters, and it was a big improvement. It carried 9 rounds if you count one in the chamber. It was much smaller and lighter in most cases to carry, and extremely reliable. So for many years, it was a very popular duty gun in the European market and enjoyed maybe a little bit of success around the world. So this all goes back to the 1970s through the 80s, strongly through the 80s, and then even into the 90s. So eventually the P6 or P225 was replaced by guns that seemed to be more popular for duty use in those days. You know, they got a little bit bigger, capacities got larger. We started to see a lot more double stacks, and so it really kind of went the way of the dodo. And this happened kind of in the 1990s, and so it found itself on the surplus market. And there are a lot of those guns that are in not just collectors' hands, but just general shooters enjoy them. Well, the P225 is certainly made from pure Sig Sauer DNA. I mean, just look at it at a distance and you can tell what it is if you know handguns very well. It's got that, certainly it's got that profile. It's even got that look head on and tail on. It is a hammer-fired, double-action, single-action gun with a decocking mechanism, just like the P226, just like the P229, the P220. It falls right in line. It's just a miniaturized version of those guns, and it's a thinner one because it's a single stack. And that was both the sort of blessing and the curse of the gun, because the single stack magazine is razor thin, and it allowed that gun to be very thin, extremely comfortable, and very shootable. But capacity is king, and eventually that 8-round magazine became its undoing. If you asked me to write down a list of my top 10 favorite handguns, man, that would be hard. It would be hard because I like so many. I mean, I love handguns. So that would be a difficult task for me to try and do. And it may change depending on when I write that list. But one of the guns that I can promise you would be on that list, probably every single time I write it, would be this one right here. The Sig Sauer P225 A1. This is a 9mm small single stack handgun, hammer fired, and you know, you think, well, those specs aren't screaming favorite gun. Trust me, you got to shoot it to understand. And maybe to some degree you have to put away your looking at it through today's lens hat. Boy, that's mixing all kinds of metaphors there. But you know, really you have to kind of maybe take a step back and think, well, you know, the idea today is the smallest possible gun that holds the most possible capacity. I get it, I'm not going to argue with you, but man, there is something to be said for just a beautifully designed and perfectly manufactured handgun that is just so comfortable, so pleasant to shoot. And I would submit to you, still a viable alternative today. This is not a large gun. There are other guns that are much bigger than this that people are carrying every day, I promise you that. Hammer fired? I like hammer fired. And this trigger is incredible. There goes that reset. Well, like I said, one possible downside is it holds 8 rounds in the magazine. That gives you a possibility of 9 when you do your 8 plus 1. That's math even I can do. But it is a tiny, narrow, single stack magazine. It is a double action, single action. Has a decocker, like SIGs tend to do. And I'm going to start out double action this time. Beautiful trigger. And the single action trigger on this is Legion worthy. Let me just say it that way. Got excellent night sights. It is just one of my very favorites. It's very thin. The G10 grips feel great. It's a smooth face trigger. And frankly, I don't know how anybody who could say they're a fan of the classic Sig Sauer pistol and doesn't own one of these can justify that. I mean, this is like almost, you know, the P226 is legendary, the P220 equally so. I think this belongs right up there with them. This is just a beautiful little 9mm handgun. Shooting those TA targets, by the way. You know, they're a friend of the channel, and I have a discount code. You can find that down below someplace and save 10%. I don't get any money back. But it's nice to be able to help you save a few bucks. So a few years ago, Sig Sauer decided to remake the P225, and they did so as the P225-A1. And I ran just as fast as my little legs could get me to the gun store to get one. And I'm really happy that I did. It's been one of my favorites for years. I love to shoot it, and it just fits in so perfectly with the Sig Sauer collection. So their choices for remanufacturing the P225 were met with mixed opinion among the Sig Sauer faithful. And that is that they didn't produce it exactly the same way that it was produced in the 70s. They modified it and updated it, basically, improved the gun, while keeping the exact same form factor, same look, same feel, same performance, only a little better performance. They raised the bar for materials. Instead of being a stamped slide, it was a milled stainless steel slide, for example. They upgraded the trigger group to be a much more modern, short reset trigger system that is absolutely phenomenal in the P225A1. So the changes that they made were to modernize it and make it a gun that you would want to buy today as a brand new model. And I think that even though some collectors might poo-poo that idea, I think it ends up ultimately working to their benefit, because those classic original models are still distinct. They are still the original stamped slide and so forth. So the new one is really the new version of the older gun, and that's all it was ever really intended to be. But of course, in today's gun market, it's all about being as small and light as you possibly can be and carrying the most ammunition. So micro 9mm miracle guns that have high capacity for their size are really taking over the market. So a gun that is this small, that holds only an 8-round magazine, is certainly going to have limited success. And I think that once all the people like me who just love the gun for what it is, and the people who like to collect Sig Sauers and so on, once we all bought ours, I think the sales just sort of fell off to a trickle. And so Sig Sauer being Sig Sauer, you know, they've got a million SKUs and they're always coming out with new stuff. And sometimes they've got to move old stuff out of the way to make new room for the new stuff. So I think that was the case here. And in talking to folks at Sig Sauer, I think that it's unlikely that we'll ever see this come back, although they never say never up in New Hampshire. And it certainly could if there was a call for it. But I think that, I mean, they're not burning the blueprints or anything like that, or they're smashing the molds or anything. But I think that it's unlikely anytime soon that we would see this gun come back. So if you find one on the used market, it's probably one that you're going to want to stop and take a look at, because it is, in my opinion, from just the perspective of a shooter, somebody who loves to take a good handgun out to the range and just enjoy it, it is one of the best in its size and class that I've ever had. And so I'm happy to have mine, and you're not getting that. It's not for sale. But I thought it was worth resharing the SIG P225, even though it's not a brand new gun, and it's not even a gun that you can get certainly in the new market. So I hope you enjoyed looking at the SIG P225-A1 with me. I enjoyed bringing it to you again. And I do have some new stuff in the pipeline, so stay tuned for that. There are some brand new things coming your way. If you don't subscribe to the channel, please do. I would appreciate it. It does help out if you subscribe and click the notification bell so you know when new things are released. Don't forget to like the video if you are so inclined. That also helps the algorithms and helps my channel grow. Thanks so much. See you again soon.